Okay, so I'm going to share my story. Those two beautiful girls were my daughters that were on the plane with their grandparents. So the first man you saw was Brian. He was their grandfather, and Marion was their grandmother. Brian was the pilot of one of the planes. So I'll explain to you from the beginning our whole story, our whole family, and this is our journey, how we found God in this whole, how craziness of things. So I've got 6 beautiful children. I've got Casey, who's our eldest. I've got Alex and Madison, who I now share with God. I have got Torin, I've got Eamon, and I've got Keelan. I was very blessed to be with 6 amazing kids. I wanted 8 to fill my dining room table, but I think my husband nearly had a heart attack. If I had to explain, Casey's our eldest. She is 24. She's my husband from a previous marriage, not a marriage, a previous relationship. She was 8 months when I got her, and she's got my heart. She might not have my blood, but she's got my heart. Alex was my golden child. Alex was my soulmate, my best friend. Maddie was my indigo child. That was her father's be-all and end-all. She lived for her dad. Her dad was everything. She was, I think, if I could explain to her, 90% of the time, she was away with the fairies, if anything. Torrance must stay. I'll explain to you about that. So normally you'll see us with our oldest son. He's not here today because it's very, very hard for him. He's still going through a lot. He lost his best friends that day. Torin was the youngest. And then we've got Eamon, who is my beautiful, and he is my vice mommy. So when I'm not there, Eamon's in charge, because that kid cannot tell a porcupine, okay? Whatever. If I want to know something, the truth will come out. So he will dob whoever in. So if I'm not there, Eamon's in charge. And then there's Keelan, who is my colour. He just adds so much colour into our lives. So Andy and I lived in South Africa, in Johannesburg. We had 4 children then, Casey, Alex, Madison, and Torin. We were Christian, if I can say, but we didn't go to church, we didn't practice, we believed in God. It wasn't like our be-all and end-all, if you know what I mean. We sent our girls to good Christian schools, so they all went to Trinity. And then my husband was offered a job in Doak. And I thought, this is going to be a beautiful experience. We can take our kids over to Doak and show them, maybe travel a bit, show them a different society, different religion and all that as well. So we moved to Doak. I loved Doak. I've got lots of friends who are Muslim there as well, and they are absolutely beautiful people. They stood by us during this whole thing. So we lived in Doak since 2010. We lived there for 3 years. And then in 2011, I think it was July, we went to Australia on holiday. We always planned to move to Australia, but we were coming here to see where we wanted to stay. Our family lived here. We wanted to come here on holiday because it was Ramadan then, and it's not fair on our kids to stay in a country that is having Ramadan because you're not allowed to go out, drink in public, and there's a lot of rules you've got to follow. So we came to Australia, had the best holiday of our lives. Alex found the school. Alex was a very good swimmer. She would have swam for the Olympics, I'm convinced. This kid, at the age of 2, swam a 25-metre pool with no problem. She broke records in grade 1. Her records still stand at her school. They keep telling me, no one's broken a record this year, no one's broken a record. And then after that beautiful, amazing holiday, we swam with family and everything, we came back to Doak. A day after landing, I had a very, very, very bad asthma attack. I actually thought I was going to die. I remember lying on the floor and my little girl patting me on the head saying, Mommy, don't go anywhere. And I said to Alex, if anything happens, make sure you look after your brother and your sister. Anyway, push comes to shove, I landed up in hospital for 3 days because of the humidity in my lungs and all that. And then I decided, I'm going to go back to South Africa on holiday. I'll take another holiday because Ramadan's quite long. And we went back to South Africa, the girls, and Torin and myself. Andy would follow a few days later. And the girls were so excited to see their grandparents. They were thrilled. And he had organised this beautiful trip. They were practically raised in an aeroplane, their grandfather being a pilot and all. They were practically raised. So there was never any fear And they were never, ever scared to go on a plane. They were at every air show and everything like that. And I remember they said, okay, well, we're going up. We're flying in this big air show up in Zanin. My uncle, as you can see, he was going to fly. And he owned an Albatross as well as another plane, and he did air shows and all that. And they were going to stay at a beautiful game farm with all the other pilots that weekend. And I was fine with it. I didn't send Torin, because Torin doesn't know how to behave. At that age, he didn't know how to behave at an air show. And he would run in and around the planes. And I thought, oh, I'll keep Torin back this time. Anyway, that night I dropped the girls off on the Friday at their grandparents'. We had the best evening. My uncle brought out his guitar. Madison sang Taylor Swift because she had the most beautiful voice. Her favorite song was that one from Romeo and Juliet. And she sang that for everyone. And then I thought, okay, Andrew landed on the Saturday and we were going to collect the girls on the Sunday after the planes had come back from Zanin. And Sunday we met with friends. I was waiting for their... I remember phoning in the morning just to check that they had taken off, and there was no answer. I thought, oh, okay, well, then they've obviously taken off and they're coming back. And we were meeting friends anyway at Galuli's and going to have lunch, and then we were going to go fetch the girls. And I remember taking Torin to the bathroom and coming back, and everyone was in silence. And I'm like, no, what have I done? And my husband said, the planes haven't come back. And I'm like, and I remember just going cold. And I'm like, what are you saying? The planes haven't come back. And he says, they haven't come back to the airport yet. They can't find them. And from there, it was a blur. I grabbed Torin. I said, get in the car. I phoned my mom. We were shot through to the airport, and there were so many people there already. And I remember saying to God, please, you know this is my biggest fear, to take my kids, who I love. They mean the world to me. My life revolved around my children. If I can explain to you, I live, eat, breathe for my kids. And I said, please don't do this. And I kept hearing this voice, trust me, Bronwyn, trust me. And I'm okay, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. And that night they heard nothing. So the next day I said, I can't sit here in Joburg while my girls are sitting out in Zanin somewhere cold. So we got in a car and we drove all the way down to Zanin, and we got to the one airport there, and I remember everything was a blur. Poor old Torin was just dragged with me, had no change of clothes. This poor kid, he didn't say a word. He just carried on. And I remember everyone was talking, the police were there, and I was lying on the tar strip at this little airport where the show was, and I was crying, and I was saying, please, please, please. And I remember looking up, and there were 13 white doves flying in one direction, and I said, no, that's not a sign, because there were 13 people on that plane, those two planes. And I said, that's not a sign, I don't believe in this is absolute rubbish. And for 3 days they couldn't find those planes because they went into a very deep ravine and that. And you know, when you hang on to hope. I kept saying to the police, no, he's such a good pilot. He's landed on top of the cliff. They can't get down, but everyone's okay. They might be hurt, but everyone's okay. And then on the third day, I remember sitting in this one building, and the psychologist that was allocated to us came in and he said, Bron, Andy, I need you to sit down. Torin, they removed from the building straight away. And they said, there are no survivors. They found the plane. And I remember just screaming, punching the wall, going wild, and I said, I hate you. I remember turning around and saying to God, I hate you. You told me to trust you. I hate you. And I remember at that point, these people from another church came in to speak to me. I think they must have seen something from an exorcism, because they ran. The psychologist said they took one look at me and they turned and ran out, because there was no way. And I said, I don't ever want to talk to people like you again, because he's betrayed me. I've lost all my trust in that man. I said, he is not my father. And people came up to fetch us, because I just, like I said, everything was a blur from there. We got back to Joburg. There were so many people at the house, and just so many people. But going back, in Doak, Alex made a very good friend with a girl called Emma. Now, guess what Emma's daddy did? Emma's daddy led the biggest church in Doak Fellowship. How strange is that? And every time Andy and I used to go fetch Alex from Emma for a play date, Rob used to run out and say, come and join us on a Friday, because their Friday is a Sunday. And I'd like, yeah, we'll, sure, no problem. And Alex would get in the car and I'd say, is that one of those happy clappy churches? Because we ain't going. Okay? So, shh. She's like, I think they do. They sing and they dance. I'm like, nah. Get in the car, wave goodbye to Rob and say, thanks, see you later. So, and I remember the one person I wanted to talk to, because I was so angry, I cannot tell you how angry I was Rob. I didn't know him properly. He was just my daughter's best friend's father. We didn't know them, like, we weren't house friends or anything, we were acquaintances. And I picked up the phone and I phoned him, and he answered the phone and he said, God's crying with you, Bronwyn. That's what he said. God is crying too. And I said, how can I forgive a man that has taken my life, shattered my heart? Because if I tell you, when people say their heart is breaking, it is not an emotional pain. It is a physical pain, because your heart, it feels like you're having a heart attack, because your heart is breaking. That's how bad it is. And he said, and I said to him, Rob, if there's anyone that I want to do the service for the girls, would be you. And he said, Alette and I are already on the plane. We're coming to you. And that to me was just amazing, that this man only knew my daughter, got on a plane, flew out, left his church in Doak, and came to be by our sides during this whole ordeal. And I remember saying to him, God doesn't do this because he hates you. We don't serve an evil God, we serve a loving God. And I couldn't understand, how can we serve a loving God if this is what he's done to my family? Look at this little boy. And I remember as well, going back to that time Andy and I would drive in Zanin, I remember saying to Andy, I cannot live, I want to end it now. And Andy said, let's end it. And we didn't realize Torin was sitting behind us. This little boy, and he turned around and he said, but Mommy and Daddy, I'm still here. And I love you. I had to stay for Torin. Torin's my stay. That's why I say I stayed for Torin. Because imagine doing that to a little boy, taking away his father and his mom, because we can't deal with the grief, and leaving him. He would have so much to have dealt with, this kid. He would never have survived. I would have messed him up completely. And I think if I got to heaven, I think my girls would have smacked me on my head and said, what were you thinking? How could you do that to him? So Tor's my stay. He's a beautiful kid. He's still very heartbroken. If you meet him here, you'll always see he's got his head down or whatever. I think he needs to have an answer. He's still on that journey to why you took my best friends. He hasn't developed such a bond with his younger siblings because he's got this absolute fear that God's going to take them away from him as well. So he stands back. So he loves them dearly, but he has not got that connection, which we're still trying to work on. So for Torin, we have to explain, people need to understand where he's coming from. He will sit here, he listens in church, and he is he gets the highest marks in biblical studies at school, goes to every lunch service or whatever they have at school. He's a very gifted child, and his teacher said, maybe he should go into biblical. But I think Torin, like I said to Mandy now, Torin's looking for answers. I think that's why Torin studies so hard. He wants God to answer him why. So going back to our story, anyway, there were so many people. I remember for those first couple of, I just sat in the bathroom. I sat in a bath of water, and my mom and my aunt would come in and say, you have to get yourself together, girl, because Torin needs you. And you're breaking his heart, and your husband needs you. And I'm like, how do you get through something like this? How honestly do you get through something like this? I had to organize a memorial for 2 beautiful girls. And then I had to go to my aunt's and uncle's memorial. And 13 people had passed away on that plane. 13 good people. And I remember saying to God, how dare you take 2 beautiful girls that would have offered this world so much? They would have made this world so beautiful. But yet, you allow drug addicts, you allow rapists, you allow criminals to walk the streets. But you took them. I don't know. I still can't answer that question. It's a discussion for myself and him one day when I get up there. And so I decided to have a celebration of life because they were so beautiful. And we decided to have it at their best place ever. The girls loved the Botanical Gardens in Roodepoort, and they closed the whole Botanical Gardens for us that day. There were so many people that arrived at their memorial. Rob did the memorial, but he did such an awesome celebration of life for my girls. Like, he got up and he sang and they danced, and that's who my girls were. There was no like just sitting there moping and crying. It was just absolutely beautiful. And someone said to me, oh, but you've got to have it in a church to make it feel like God's there. And I said, that's rubbish. God's everywhere. He doesn't only live in a church. I can have their memorial wherever I feel. And when Rob started talking, there was so much wind you cannot believe. And the 2 black eagles were out that day, and they were swirling, which never happens. It's very, very rare that they will come out and they will do whatever they have to do on those 2 days. And when Rob put down the mic, the wind was like, done. Nothing. People were commenting like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how windy it was. And the minute Rob stopped talking and the memorial was over, the wind just stopped. And I believe it was 1,000 or even more angels there flapping their wings to say, we are here with you. We are here. And your girls are safe. And they're with us now. So began our long journey to find God. Anyway, Andy and I stayed in South Africa for a little bit, for a couple of months, and then we had to go back and get back to normal life in Doak. And we went back to Doak, and Rob said, join us. And I thought, oh, what's this going to hurt? Let's just go. And I remember we arrived at Doak Fellowship on that Friday, and wow, what we got was totally unexpected. Nothing what I ever expected a church to be like. The love, the acceptance. Everyone prayed over us, and when I say we found our Christianity in a Muslim country, we found God in Muslim country, believe it or not. That's where we found him, and we found our family. So that was part of it. So we continued. I went back to teaching. I wasn't going to teach because for me it was very hard to go and teach little girls and other little boys, and I had that longing for my daughters because I missed them so much. I was very, very close to my daughters. Everywhere I went, they were shadows, except Madison. She was my husband's shadow. Wherever he went, she went. And we returned back to South Africa, and I remember I got a phone call from my gynecologist, and he said, Bron, come in, I want to see you. And I'm like, I'm not having any more kids because it brings you a lot of pain. Don't. And if anyone asks me, don't have kids because it brings you a lot of heart sore if anything should happen. And he sat me down and he said, Bron, you need to fill your dining room table. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And he explained to me, if Torin was the oldest, fine, but Torin wasn't the oldest. Torin needs siblings, needs people around him. For Torin to heal, Torin needs to have something around him that's going to help him heal. I don't think Torin knew what he's getting with those 2 boys, but yes. And I thought, okay, we'll give it a go, all right. So I fell pregnant with Eamon. Well, before I fell pregnant with Eamon, I had miscarried. I miscarried twins. And I was like, oh. Then I fell pregnant with Eamon, and what a blessing. Eamon's second name is Job. Because if we go back in the Bible, how much did Job not have taken away from him before God started giving back to him? So Andy and I decided we're going to call Eamon Job Doak. And he was born, absolute blessing. It was a very hard time for me. I begged my doctor to put me under, that I didn't want to, if anything happened, I didn't want to be awake in case I lost another kid. And I had psychologists on board and everything like that to help me through the birth. And he came up beautiful. He wasn't the prettiest baby, I can be honest. But to me, he was beautiful. Okay. He was absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, when, like, you got this little niggly feeling something's wrong. So in South Africa, they don't do newborn hearing tests. You get them done at 6 weeks. But I always thought, oh, God's blessed me with this amazing kid. It's like, you know, nothing will go wrong. Nothing will happen. It's just amazing. And I joined a mother's group, and all the other babies started sitting and rolling, and I'm thinking, from my experience, my kids were always early doing these things. And Eamon just bloop every time, and bloop, and he does this with his hands, and he does this with his feet. I'm like, what's going on? So I enrolled him into OT, did the physio and everything, because I'm a teacher, I know what's going on. And I remember sitting with him one day and we're playing, and the door slammed. It went, whoa! He did not budge. He just carried on playing. And I'm like, oh, there's something wrong. So we took Eamon for hearing tests, and she said to me, I think go and see your ENT. Maybe he's got glue ear. So we went to the ENT. They did grommets and everything. I took him back for a hearing test. He failed. There was no sound, no nothing. Andy and I were like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. I remember driving in the car. Whenever something I needed to release or be angry or cry, I used to get in the car. And I remember saying, God, I don't want to talk to you today. Put Jesus on the line. You're not my friend. I'm not talking to you. And I remember I said, I'll only talk to Jesus, not you. And I asked him, why? Why? After everything that we've been through, why? And then I started looking back. I contracted German measles. Could be the German measles in Doak that made my son deaf, or could be this, could be that. But then it's almost like he sent us a bit of hope. I started meeting kids with cochlear implants and really realizing, oh, it's not the end of the world. You know, these kids can still function. Because as any mother, you worry about your children. So when I found out he was deaf, I'm like, he's not going to get married. No one's going to want him. Who's going to hire him? You know, he's going to be with us for the rest of his life. And when something happens to me, what's going to happen to him? So I just I can't believe this. Anyway, we were put in touch with this phenomenal doctor, Dr. Hockman. I became part of furniture in his place because I'm just that mother that doesn't let go. If I want something done, I need it done now. And he did Eamon's cochlears, beautiful. Eamon was so quick at picking up language, you cannot believe. But already then, Eamon was making such a change in this. Like everything he did, people would notice. And he'd be like such an inspiration to a lot of people. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. Oh, thank you. And then we decided to have another kid. And I wanted to have selection. I wanted a girl. So I went off to Makani. I said, I only want a girl. I want a girl. I need a girl. You don't understand. I'm longing for a girl. I've always been a girl mommy. Anyway, he was convinced 1 million of those little swimmers were all girls. There were no boys, none whatsoever. I went for my test at 12 weeks to see what I was having. And he's like, I think maybe one little boy got through. And I'm like, you don't even have to say it. I can see it already. And there, I want to tell people, you cannot play God. You cannot choose what he's got planned for you. Because out of all those little girls, that little boy made it through. And generally, you know, from human study, biology and all that, girls are a lot quicker than boys in swimming and doing what they have to do. So along came Keelan. And I remember after giving birth to him, he was beautiful. He was my most beautiful baby. He had hair, he had these beautiful dark eyes. And I remember always saying to God, please give me a child that looks like Ellie. Dark hair, dark eyes. And when he came out, my gynecologist said, Bron, he's answered your prayers. He's dark-haired and he's got dark eyes. And I was, thank you. Anyway, they were convinced Keelan could hear, convinced. Because if they said something, he'd turn or whatever, so they were convinced. 6 weeks down the line, my specialist said, well, let's just test. Let's just see if Keelan's also got the same gene as Eamon or anything wrong. And true as Bob, Keelan was born profoundly deaf. And that's when I said to God, okay, I'm actually going to ask Vodafone to disconnect us completely, lose my number, I'll lose your number, and I'll deal with one person from now on. There's no way I'm going to deal with you anymore, because how can you do this? How? Where? Well, I think you must probably be asking the same thing, like how and why. Anyway, we were accepted into Australia, believe it or not, and we decided to come over, boys both with cochlear implants. doing fantastically well. We were very blessed to get into a phenomenal school, St. Stephen's Caramel, that had a space for our kids. And they have teachers of the deaf on their premises. So, wow, that's amazing. So that's fantastic, because I always had that fear my boys would never be able to mainstream. They'd never be able to be like other children, because in SA you don't have those schools that mainstream. Your kids either go to a different school or they go to a mainstream school. And it was fantastic. But then my boys have very bad balance, and they battle to ride a bike, they battle to walk, they knock over things. If they're standing, they will sometimes trip over children and hurt them. They're not doing it on purpose, but it's an accident. And I thought, Andy, before we have any more kids, let's just go for genetic testing. Something said to me, go and have genetic testing done. Anyway, we went and had the genetic testing done. And before then, I had this niggling feeling. I remember reading on Dr. Google, don't ever, ever do Dr. Google, anyone, because it will cause severe paranoia. And something stood out to me. I went straight to a page saying Usher syndrome. And I'm like, okay, the boys have got all these symptoms, but it can't be. And I remember going through, it was almost like another tragedy happening in my life. I was sobbing. I remember sobbing. I said to Andy, I think the boys have Usher syndrome. Now, Usher syndrome is, your kids are born profoundly deaf. They are given the gift of sight, only to have it taken away from them later on in their life. So the boys will go blind eventually. And I was like, If my faith is being tested now, it is being tested. But you know what? I stood strong within my faith. Because I remember there was a song that played when I lost everything in Doak. After the girls coming back to Doak, I remember standing in the kitchen and I was listening to music, and the song that played was from Carrie Underwood, Jesus Take the Wheel. And I thought, how strange is that? And now for me, that's my song. Yeah, I'll just pass the wheel on to you. If I can't handle it, I'll just give you the wheel. And I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to do that. No more. Yeah, you take it. You deal with it, and I will just follow. I will just listen to whatever you want me to do, I will follow. So anyway, we had the genetic testing done. Came back 2 weeks later, non-syndromic. We celebrated. We were so happy. It was yay, not ashes. Only to have our little bubble burst 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. We need to see you. The boys had Usher syndrome, but not just Usher's, the worst Usher's, 1D. So that is one of your biggest genes with Usher syndrome. In their teens, they'll lose it a lot quicker than other kids. And I was like, I can't believe this. But you know what? You take the wheel. You deal with it. Anyway, I had to go to my first appointment at an optometrist at one of the hospitals, and I remember saying, I need hope. I'm that mother that needs hope. I don't care, even if you're lying about it, just give me that little piece of hope so I've got something I can carry on with. And the doctor said, I said, they reckon there will be a cure for this eventually one day. And he looked at me and said, no, your boy's going to go blind, and that's it. And I remember walking out there and I was devastated. Not 1 ounce of hope this doctor gave me. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll find someone else. I'll go to another ophthalmologist. And I went to a guy at Lion's Eye, Dr. Fred. And I remember walking into his office, and he turned around and he said, so how can I help you? And how amazing is that? So our foundation for our charity has been based on what he said, how can I help you? And he has been absolutely phenomenal during this journey. He has given us so much hope, so much support, and my boys absolutely love him. He's never once said to me, it might not be in my boy's lifetime that we find a cure for their eyesight. It might be in another child's lifetime, which is, at least there's hope. And we decided straight off we weren't going to lie to Eamon and Keelan. We were going to tell them straight off that this is what's going to happen, so we rip off the Band-Aid. Because I remember going through to a conference in Melbourne with other Usher kids, and parents hadn't told their children at the age of 13 that they were going to go blind. Now, can you imagine the mental health problems some of these kids experience? Anyway, 2 years ago, a child, 18, Queensland, Usher syndrome, took his own life because he couldn't cope. So whenever anyone asks me, I always tell them be upfront and honest and have a lot of faith, because That is our, like Eamon always says, but what happens? I'm like, you will always, no matter what, have God on your side. And if you believe in him and you love him, Eamon and Keelan, you will always be protected. I might not be here one day, but he will be. Always, always, always surround you with protection. And you know how amazing God has been. Eamon is risen to that occasion. He has got God in his heart like you can't believe. I don't know if it's the name Job, but he was offered to go and talk in front of a little 6-year-old in front of Parliament in Canberra 2 years ago. And I remember going with him, and he stood up. He said, no, I don't need my notes. And he put his notes aside, and he stood up, and he addressed the whole of Parliament. And he told his story, and he said, part of his story was like, you know what happened? And he brought religion into it. And he said, God forgot to give me hearing when I was born. So he quickly phoned Dr. Hockman and said, hey, Hock, can you help me out here? Can you just give Eamon some, hearing? And let's see how we go from here. So Hockman said, no problem, God, I've got this. And he hooked Eamon up with hearing. And that's Eamon's story. And this kid has touched so many people's hearts along his journey. And yes, he does say, yes, I am scared of going blind. Yes, my brother is scared of going blind. Do we want to live in darkness? No. But I'm luckier than most because I've got memories. I know what an elephant looks like. I know what a swimming pool looks like. I know what the color yellow looks like. Children who are born completely blind don't have that opportunity. So he will always look on the good side. And he's such a positive role model for so many people. And I think he's so honest, like I said to you, so honest. A porcupine can't come out of that kid's mouth. And he oozes, he loves God. All my boys love God. Torin's got a lot of questions. Casey loves God. She's also got a lot of questions because she also lost her sisters that day. But she didn't take it like Torin took it, where Torin spent 24 hours a day with his sisters. Case was, we shared custody. So it was in and out. And I think if you had to ask me, I believe that God has great plans for my boys. I think he's got great plans. And I remember someone saying to me, Bronwyn, read the book The Shack. So I don't know if any of you have read Shack. Oh, well, I didn't understand a word it said. I started reading it and I was like, I don't get it. Anyway, I watched the movie. I have never cried so much in my entire life when I watched that movie and I finally got it. When I saw that little girl in heaven, how happy she was and how surrounded they were in just by love, I could never ask for a better babysitter. Thank God. I could never. I do have questions. I will ask him. I have a whole day booked out with that man one day when I get up there. I'm going to say, why? And only he can tell me why. But I know when I cry, he cries. And when I'm angry, he forgives me. I'm not a perfect mom. I can tell you right now. I scream every day at my kids. I don't use the best language sometimes. I think if there was a swear jar in my house, it will be full to the top and I could actually buy a mansion. But I'm so grateful for what he's given me every night when I go to bed. Thank you for giving me 10 years with Alex. And thank you for giving me 7 years with Maddie. Because I can promise you now, they've taught me so much. People ask me, Bronwyn, if you knew then, would you have had kids? Yes, I would have had kids. I would have had them because I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have had them. And every night I'll get down on my knees or I'll thank him in bed and I'll say, thank you. And you know what? I know where my kids are going. I'm not scared to die. Like people say, aren't you scared? I'm like, hell no. Because one day when I get up there, my hope stands for he alone promises eternity. And he alone promises it for me. That when I get up to heaven one day, I'm going to have the best celebration ever. I've got my girls there. I've got so many people there. And you know what the one thing is? Like people say, weren't you angry at your uncle? No, that was the one thing God put on my heart. I forgave him straight away. I remember standing on that tarmac and saying, I forgive you, Brian. Because who would set out that day to go kill the most important people in that man's life? Brian and Marion didn't have children. Brian's my father's brother. My father wasn't talking to me. He didn't talk to me. So Brian stepped in my father's place, and he helped my mom as well raise us and be there for us. I used to get fetched from school on a plane. So I never had that fear. You never have that fear. And now, what is Eamon's biggest ambition? What does he want to become one day? He wants to become a pilot. So it obviously runs in his blood. And someone said, "Oh, aren't you scared?" No. If your daughter or your son passed away in a car accident, would you stop them from driving? No. So why would I take away his dreams? I don't know what's planned for us. But all I can say is you need to trust and you need to give everything over to him. You're going to have bad times. No life is perfect. No Christian life. Like, if I can explain to you, like you said once, you're going to have the hardest time being a Christian. And believe me, you are. I could have gone either way. I could have hated him for the rest of my life and lived that awful, awful life. Or I could have turned to him and said, "Help me through this. I'm going to trust you. I don't know yet where we're going, but already I see such amazing things happening in our life, little things. No, we're not millionaires. Not God said, "Yeah, take $1 million because I feel what I've done," or whatever. Yeah, and I'm going to give you this beautiful love. And we've got humps in our road all the time. My boys' mountain route is not straight. They are going to have a very, very hard journey climbing to the top of that cliff. My son, Torin, has got so many answers that need to be answered. And Eugene, I thank you for coming into Torin's life, because I don't know how that happened. And I believe God has definitely, I don't know, but I do believe God's working something there. So I don't know, but thank you. What else can I say to you guys? There's so much like that we've got a fundraising going. We were raising for a stem cell robot, as you guys know, for Eamon and Keelan to hopefully find a cure for lots of diseases, lots of childhood diseases in WA and all over the world. And that day at the lunch, I was the most expensive equipment. It was $750,000 for a stem cell robot. Rhonda got up and she said, "I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'll buy the whole thing." Who made her get up? She did not have a clue that day that she was going to spend $750,000 towards a stem cell robot. She got up and she said, "I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'll buy it." And all I can say is, thank you, Lord. You do come through. And he does. He does come through in little ways. And I believe, he always shows me signs. My girls absolutely loved dragonflies. Their room was dragonflies. Everything is a dragonfly. And during my worst times, like in Doak, in the middle of the heat, I don't know if any of you can relate, it is hot. Nothing can survive in that heat. And the one day I went and sat outside and I was sobbing, and 2 little dragonflies were sitting on the wall in that heat. I remember walking the other day in that bush area because I was just having a bad day. I needed to talk to God. I was fighting with everyone in my household. Nothing was going right. And I remember walking, and in front of me, 2 little dragonflies were dancing the whole way. And it was getting dark. And they were just dancing the whole way, guiding me back to my car. So little signs, always take that in, that he's never left your side. And you know what? There are going to be a lot of questions in that. And God knows, I think God knows that you're not perfect. And he's my father. And I'm allowed to scream at him as far as I'm concerned. I'm allowed to have temper tantrums because at the end of the day, that man forgives me. And he puts his arms around me. And he's got unconditional love. And he doesn't stop talking to me. I might stop talking to him for a bit, but he has never stopped talking to me. I sometimes just have to open my ears and listen. Like when he says, just give it to me. Give it to me, and there are things. You don't have to worry about everything. And I think, that's my story. So, hope. He alone promises eternity. This is a video of my beautiful, beautiful girls. And I just want to share this with you. They are, like I said, Andy and I, normally a marriage does not survive losing a child. They say most of them don't. Andy and I never blamed each other. Andy never turned around and said to me, why did you go back to South Africa? Why did you let the girls go back on their plane? Never once. Never once. And he always say, we have the most beautiful children, and thank you. And I do. Yes, I share two with God now. And like I said, I have the best babysitter in the world. Who can say that?